I was going to check the stage to see if everything is safe. And I was just checking people as we came in to see that nobody had any hidden instruments of any sort, or guns or whatever. But anyhow, I'm delighted to be here. I'll be looking down at my notes. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I'm here looking at my wife Maureen, and Catherine Fox beside her here has helped me to get my thoughts in a disciplined form, some way disciplined. So I'm going to thank Joe in particular. Of course, he said to me last year, would I come over through Michael Norris, and I said, well, there was a lot of arrows flying in my direction, so I was ducking and trying to survive. But I knew at some point I should be here, so I'm thrilled to be here today. And thank you again, Joe. Now, I may need my glasses here. Now, my name is Paddy Kelly, you probably know that. Joe Mulholland here beside me. Now, why am I here today? I'm here because I strongly want to share in the national debate. I think it's a little bit unbalanced at the moment. And we won't complain about the media or any group, but I think we should all have some representation. You know, I've been very involved in the property game, and I shouldn't really say a game because it's an industry, big employer. At the peak, there was 280,000 people, too many people, obviously too much work being done. And it was about 23% of our GMP. So I want to be part of the solution if I can be included. And at times we kind of wonder, are we to be locked away or locked out of the debate? Who are we as property developers? You've probably heard of some, you know some, and we all come in different forms. Just as I was walking out this morning, I was thinking about Paddy MacGill. And the first time I met Paddy was with a friend of mine, Jerry Houlihan, and he was building a little factory, small little factory, maybe 4,000 square feet. So he's made himself, got busy down the years, has done most of his things overseas, but a real gentleman as far as I'm concerned. There's many, you know, a more or less a consistent partner called John Flynn, and I'd always say of John, he's been a golden thread in my life. My brothers, I've done business with all my brothers, and lots of people. I have a partnership model. So, moving on a little bit. I'm going to deal with what I'm saying, and I'm backtracking a bit here now, under two main headings. How do we get ourselves into this situation? And the way forward is of much greater interest to me, but it's no harm spending a bit of time in the past. But I suppose we spent too much time on it, really. And I spent a lot of time in the States and Canada and outside Ireland. So generally I feel there was no real road map. You know, coming across here, we know, my first time over here, but we knew more or less where we were going, coming to the northwest of Ireland. And we made no mistakes on the way, only because we had a road map. You know, where did we lose the plot? Was it ineffective regulation? Did we lose control of our cost base? I mean, and it's in some ways an awful thing. When you think of costs, Maureen and I tend to do a bit of shopping in America. But certainly up to recently, the prices were half what they were here. That was partly because the dollar too was 150 to the euro. But coming back here, the price of petrol, the price of everything would strike you. And I think the problem was perhaps even bigger than that. No real revision or vision for the Republic. I was born in 1944, and we had all, with my uncles, the greatness of Ireland and the possibilities of Ireland. And in a sense, we've never really realised our potential, I feel. The property industry's industry role in it all. I suppose we were, in a sense, at the centre of the boom. You know, in a sense, because we were nearly 25% of GMP. And you say, well, and because of that, of course, we're right in the heart of the slump, and it couldn't be otherwise. You know, we all know lots of people. I'm fairly resilient as a person, and my wife Maureen has learned it. And the big question, when you're going into these things, and I probably in ways saw it before a number of people I know, but it's how do you survive as a family, as a person in the first instance, a family, We have 4 kids, and we have these monthly meetings. We're always chatting. Is everybody okay? But there are real people everywhere, and it is personal, especially in Ireland. So you have to survive psychologically and, in a healthy way. And a lot of our friends, a number of my close enough friends, took their lives, and that's very sad. So we have to keep that somewhere in the back of our minds, that when people are handing out harsh judgments or whatever, that, you're dealing with people. The credit bubble, as far as I'm concerned, is at the heart of the problem. We as a group of people, I suppose we owe maybe 5 billion. We as a family owe about 800 million. But we worked in groups or in tandem with other people. And how do we get that money? I can say to you with all honesty, it started to become easier about 10 years ago. So we used to have to beg and borrow almost at the beginning. But little by little it got easier and easier. Now I had a special relationship with Anglo, and I feel very sorry without forming judgments on a lot of people there, because they were friends. And in more recent years then we had AIB and Bank of Ireland in particular coming over the fence looking to get all the business. There's no doubt about that in the 2 to 3 years before the crash of late. In my mind, 2007, but a lot of people would say 2008. So I see the credit bubble. Now, I reckon there's 300 billion, 200 from the Irish banks and 100 from the, if you like, the foreign banks that came into the system that was unnecessary. And it simply drove the price of everything. So if you wanted to build a house, it cost you a lot more. You're buying a car. I did an interview with Fintan O'Toole, and he made reference to my BMW, which actually is a supercar. I think we paid 129,000, but the day we did that, we paid half the cost of the car was tax. And so people should be really praised for buying these things, because the Exchequer gets the dough. So does the garage and the people who make it. But Exchequer really gets it, and all the tax and petrol. But of the 300 billion, I reckon the government got into its coffers about 75 billion, maybe 60 billion. And of course that all went to pay more and more money. I think of the central government as head office. And I see today, and don't want to be critical about it, but I see the Southern Independent that our teachers here earn twice what they do in Germany. But also the costs here are so high. So how do you get down the costs? Very difficult. The built environment I've always been part of, and it's flicking along here, the things we've got involved in. And I suppose from where I sit, I remember very well, 50 years ago, about now, we were saving the hay a little bit later, and I went off with my fathers and my brothers, and we built our first bungalow for a fellow, can I think of his name now? It'll come in a minute. We went over into Roscrea, drove in every day, and we built a bungalow, fairly record time. But that's where we started. And as we went on to build hundreds of county councils' houses, and we had to put up the deeds of my father's farms as collateral. So every time you went to do something, you were putting your neck on the line, all the time, and your family's neck. And I think that's often left out of debate. And I remember years later driving down with Maureen to my parents and bringing back those deeds. Can you think? Because they were lost, and I fought for them for years, but we finally got them back. So you don't go and do these things without taking personal responsibility. Now, I've developed the partnership model. I'd say partly through necessity, but also deep down it's my desire. I like people, I love being involved. And there's no great mystery to it. A deal comes up and who has got some money, we better ring around. And a lot of it evolved fairly casually. Now, I'm looking here at Smithfield Market, and I can wait for it here, or I can even touch on Belfield Office Park. I remember that opportunity coming up, and John Flynn and I set out to buy the site. And it was part of the yesterday story of the Jones Group. I think it was 5 acres, paid $3.5 million. How do you get $3.5 million? None of us had anything like it. But about 10 of us ended up, and then you say, how do we keep everybody in line? What's the vision? Who's doing what? But we seem to do it, and in that case there, we housed Compact. And it's a deal I took a huge interest in myself, in the planning. I remember one day morning and I went down to Powerscourt, we were playing a little bit of golf, and on the tee was this chap from somewhere in Europe, so Maureen skedaddled. So I went off and played with this chap. And as we went through it, we found we were both in the property game. And the final thing that he had done, and he was retired now, was to build this huge KPMG, I think, headquarters in, it's out in near Brussels. And I couldn't believe it, on 9 acres. He sketched it all, sent me all the plans. And we had already got permission for about 140,000 square feet here in Belfield. So I came in a few days later to the architects and said, we're changing everything, which of course they don't like to hear. We're going to drop the cars underneath, which you did. We built 1,000 cars below ground and ended up building more, about 350,000 square feet. Now, that was my biggest deal at that point. And the most successful deal, certainly of that time, and that was in the 90s. But I remember dealing, and I'm maybe skipping along here, but dealing with Pat Rabbit at the time, the county manager in Dunleary, fantastic, and dealing with Porrick White and the IDA. And there was this opportunity to get these 1,000 jobs. And if we didn't do it, we were going to Scotland. Of course, again, heads on the line, Paddy, are you sure you can do this? Are we taking too much risk? On it goes. So I just mentioned that, and I'm sure I'll be coming forward and back. I got involved, or Maureen and I really got involved in the hotel business in, I remember it well, 2006, I think it was the 1st of April 2006, and a small little hotel in Leeson Street. And that had been put together by the Aer Lingus Pensions. And when they invested in the equity of the company, they got a 50p credit. But it was also locked in the building, capital allowances, and they didn't seem to be, people who had it didn't seem to be able to access it. And of course, I always think, and I'm thinking of Michael Norris here, and in particular Pat Kenny, I always think Pat Kenny taught me a lot about accountancy, and because I'm not an accountant, but you know, you sit with good people and you learn a little. But I was very quickly able to access those allowances. We had some pent-up income coming through. I was most anxious to be fully aligned with the revenue, which I have been mostly in my life, not at all times, but certainly for the last, 20 years we have. And this was an opportunity. So when we saw it, I remember saying to Jim Murphy, and he's in the news at the moment, I said, Jim, step out of the business now. I'd like to cut you in for part of the freehold, and you take 10% of the action. That's what we call it. In American terms, it's a carry. You get a fee, because you don't have any money. These fellas had no money. I remember Jim wanting to become a member of a golf course. And I said, Jim, and so he asked me for some help. I said, yeah, go ahead. We can do that. So basically got involved there. But it's interesting to think that at the end of 2007, we had 7,000 rooms. And how does that happen? It doesn't happen through luck. It happens with enormous effort. Frankie Whelan, the young man in Cork I met, I remember Maureen and I going down and meeting him, himself and Josephine. And as it happened, I sent him on 80 grand in the post and I said, Frankie, we're on. Let's go and do it. Because in saying that, you're saying it to someone that you just see that spark. And Frankie, to me, is amazing. And he's only just had a good beginning. He's only 40 years of age. So let me have a glance here where I am. How am I doing for speed and for slowness and for... Am I halfway through? Do we want any time for questions? Because that will be a...
No, take your time.
Yes. I don't want to be jumping the fences before I get to them. Now, just glancing back a bit, what kind of frustrations have we had? The planning system has always been, for me anyhow, crazy. I mean, there's very little logic in it. I like to set out a vision and say where we go and how we would get there. So we've had that all down the years. Difficult. And I can say to you now, we started assembling the site in Bray. I remember my son Simon, big site, spent about 250 million. Laid it off, brought in 5 major partners. because you were always trying to lay off the risk. Somehow, how do you balance the risk? Now, because when things go wrong, it's like a tiger at the door. It's difficult to deal with. So anyhow, we assemble the site and we go in for planning. So 5 years ago, and we just got our planning permission. Now, the local authority were very effective. But Bord Penola, for me now, I have to say, it's a disaster. Waste of money. You cannot work out, if you were to set up a betting shop and open the book and say, which are we going to get? Which permission? You just couldn't work it out from a point of logic. But just roulette. And then it's abused all the time by third-party objectives. We have a situation at Bray at the moment with this tenant, Lidl signed up. It's going on now for 9 months. Got a permission very efficiently from Dunleary. A chap that's a competitor in the town has gone and objected against us with a one-liner. And it can't proceed. So we have to go to 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, who knows. In the meantime, we could lose the tenant. So this sort of nonsense goes on, and you don't see much about it in the press. So the planning process, now up in Smurfitts, we bought the Smurfitts headquarters, I think it was about 7 years ago, and did a deal with UCD. And it's all meant to be this high-tech education, buildings that are suitable for this modern world that I hear the politicians talking about all the time. And it's taken us 6 years to get a planning permission. Went to the board, I think, 3 times. Every time you do that, it costs about 100 grand. So it's a kind of unreal. Now, I didn't find that was the case years ago. Made reference there to meeting Pat Rabbit. And I remember meeting John Fitzgerald. We had this opportunity to house UPS in Tala. This was about 500 jobs. And I went to see John Fitzgerald, who was the county manager, and said, John, there's a real opportunity here, but we're going to have to jump and take a risk. Are we going to have any cover? Because that's what it comes down to, taking personal responsibility. And you're saying, I wonder, can we take the chance? And the idea want them in there. They're coming from the States. So, anyhow, the permission was turned around very quickly. John McCabe got on and built it very efficiently. And of course, if he didn't hit the target date, it was going to cost him something like 10,000 a month. But of course, he got home faster. Why? Because, in a sense, he was almost terrified not to. So everybody comes in, works Saturday, Sunday, all over the place. And then you get it across the line. And of course, those jobs, all kind of languages were spoken in the UPS facility. Now, the Kenny report, something most of you are too young maybe to remember it, but I'd have liked at the time if it had been formalised. Why? Because the profit should be in creativity and in efficiency. It shouldn't be about knowing some councillors that put a line around your site, and because they do, they're worth 10 million or 20 million. I mean, to me, it's just a nonsense. And your neighbour can't get it, and you can, and why does that happen? So politicians are all lobbied, and on it goes, never stops. And most of the divisions aren't strategic. It's just a hit and miss. Well, that's been my experience with it. So, the way forward, have I said enough about that, Catherine? Am I... Everybody more or less happy? Good. I might at some stage just comment on this or look over.
You want to take land zoning?
Did I say that? Yeah. Did I touch on that there, the old... the Kenny report, land zoning, yeah. I suppose, we all have kids. Maureen's are my first home. I always remember it. We got married in 1970. And we had no money, very little. In fact, I had lost a lot of money. And it's about this time, a little bit later, I met Michael Norris. You met her and you're madly in love. And so we go around town and you look at the bloody smelly apartments. They're all over the place. I remember one particular one and see this lady with a lovely long fur coat, very elegant. And she didn't even come in, so we went in. And what did we find? You just wouldn't live there. So I remember going down the Nace Road, as we called it. seeing this lovely mobile home, which was 1,050, get back to furniture as a deposit, and AIB Finance, Irish Finance, gave us a loan of 1,000, everything. So we took it down to Castletown and parked it at the entrance to this land we had. Of course, I had a lot of truck with Desmond Guinness, and because when we bought the land in Castletown, we paid 120,000 for it. Of course, big part of the consideration was deferred. But at the time, we had the cash to put down 35,000, which I had made with my brothers and I. But we actually had the money. We came to Dublin first with 80,000 on deposit. We were building fast, efficient. We were building Saturday, all day Saturday. You went onto the sites and it was a live show. And no ifs, ands or buts. But the sadness I had down the years was seeing this land that became so scarce. People felt they had to land bank it. The banks were funding it. And it all resulted with, in my mind, with something like maybe 50,000 on average in the last 10 years of unnecessary costs that our kids had to carry in a big mortgage. I mean, what a nonsense. And maybe we're all some way part. I never wanted to do anything. And so it's good to keep that. And I kind of said that in the last 10 years there's been 50,000 houses a year built on average. Now that would suggest that young people have 25 billion unnecessary mortgages. I mean, it's crazy. And so we talk about idealism, we talk about the Republic, you know. And what about a little bit of common sense? Prepare plans that we can recognise, but don't spend years doing them. You can do a lot of work in 4 weeks. In fact, you can do a lot of work in 7 days when it comes to planning or any of that. Government policy. I'm saying here, I've never really been able to relate to it very well. I kind of lost contact with it in the 80s because I went to England. We dealt efficiently with planning, we built well, made lots of money. I used to get in the plane every Monday morning. Said, John Flynn never came with me. I said, John, come on over, there's plenty of money in London, let's go and do it. We built houses, offices, all that kind of thing in our lives. And we were always learning, and Maureen and I went into Lloyd's, which was a bit silly. But the Irish always brought their wives, and you had them on your arm, and you walked up and proud to be there. But all the English, there was no wives there. Because they knew coming events, and my father used to say, coming events cast for shadow before them. But you hit those problems, and we hit that problem. We had to get out of it. I remember, you'd all have heard of Jeffrey Archer, I'm sure. But I remember did you hear of Jeffrey Archer? Well, his wife is Mary. And I remember meeting her one day in Lloyd's, and I was trying to get away from it, and Maureen and I were right stuck there. How do you get away from Lloyd's? With great difficulty. So I said to Mary, my mother was Mary, and Maureen loves red, and she was wearing a beautiful red, and I just felt comfortable. And I said, Mary, we're in desperate trouble, can you help? And I always remember John Flynn coming over across the floor of Lloyd's. Who has been in Lloyd's here? The building. It's like a creamery. There's a man up here at the back. All the equipment is on the outside. And so anyway, John said, go up to the 11th floor, simply jump down, and it'll all be over. And Mary said, he says, Paddy, you can't do that. Because he took it kind of seriously. I had no intention of doing it, but I never even tried it, I can tell you. So here we go, government policy. Has the government been efficient? I mean, without being too critical, I'm not sure they have. I've said on a few occasions, and we'll get to it later. But, I mean, Dublin, the whole of Ireland is only 4.5 million people. Manchester, Toronto, Boston, you know, this is not a big place. It shouldn't take that much organisation to get the thing to work in some way right. Crazy. The way forward within the global context. Now, I say, are we big enough to sort out our problems? And I don't think I've said it. Have I said anything about NAMA there? I have. I'm going to say it in a minute. Now, in my mind, you know, first 6 months of this year, I was out of the place a little more than half. And last year, I was out for about 7 months, and Maureen and I would have spent, on one occasion in the States, almost 3 months. You're meeting people, in particular you're meeting Irish people. And people have a love of Irish people, especially in America and Canada. and they all want to be associated with us. So you're saying, I wonder, could we collect this energy? And of course, in Farmley last year, Brian Cowan organised an event which I think in time would prove to be significant, perhaps one of his best achievements. But in the world, we're about 70 million genetically connected people. The 6 million of us here, I suppose it's hard not to think of Ireland in the context of Ireland. You know, it's okay, we have the border, but in our minds somehow we see ourselves as a nation beyond. It has been part of the nation really, in a sense, is the 32 counties. So I look at that and I adopt our policies. You know, I said we're 6 million people. Yeah, okay, the size of a second-tier city. We have great relationships with the EU now. We have to align our policies to those. Our prices, we have to get our pricing right. I mean, I think we were all half proud by saying, well, we're the second most expensive place in Europe. I think people were kind of proud of it. So saying, and our houses are worth all this money. I remember the Bank of Ireland bringing out that report. I said to myself, who authorised that report to say that we were so rich? Like, the board of the Bank of Ireland must have approved it. And everybody said, God, we're so rich. Now, when I think of the government, I suppose I would love to create a legal structure where it's not possible to borrow more than a percentage of our GNP. And when we talk about GDP, and I'm sure you're all fairly familiar, there's a 30 billion difference. And what we get out of the 30 billion is 12.5% tax, apart from all the great jobs. But to be quoting our performance in GDP, is, in my mind, is a misrepresentation of the facts. We have to talk about GNP, what we produce here net. So, and I look at this, now 20 billion this year to run the government. And that man that gave a great presentation here today from Thurles, Mark Fielding, he said to me, it was about, I think he said about 9 billion in the turn at about 2000. So how do you justify those increases? It just can't be done. And who's going to pay for them? As if now the Germans, of course, because we can't afford to pay for them. I don't have any doubt about it. So I'm saying, could you legally restrict government expenditure to a percentage of our GNP? And I think it shouldn't be more than 10%. So that, if you could make that adjustment, it would be 7 billion of a saving. Because in all those wages and costs and offices is all that bloated expenditure. Now, I know Mary Harney well. We tried to help out in the health area. I said, Mary, I'd love to get involved. We opened in Smithfield. We went in for 4 private hospitals. Now, with respect to all concerned, you need a patience of Job. The medical profession are certainly very spoiled in this country. And they're the rich among us now. And, you know, when you think of the salaries and all that, those costs, when you relate it, we're involved down in Malta, and we see the costs down there as a percent. There's so many a percentage. Like a doctor's salary, what would it be in Malta? 34. But here, I mean, the basic level is just, I find it amazing. And so anyhow, let's go on. Employment, we're spending 22.5 billion this year on the unemployed. Can you just picture that sum? A full tax collection will be 33 billion this year, down from 48. If somehow you could use that as a resource and turn all that cost into capital, it wouldn't be. Just imagine that amount. I know there's huge talk about Anglo and all this, but this year it's cost us over 20 billion. How do you work that through your head? Now, I go on then and I'm looking here at productivity, and I suppose one of the things I mentioned or we put down here is Belgium, because we bought 12 hotels over there in the fund. But what was fascinating was to see when this problem came, the Belgian government said, keep the people employed. That's the policy. And if you can't afford it, we'll assist you. So can you picture the effect of that on families and the harmony of the family and the fun in the family? Because when you create unemployment, I think it's a dead hand on the family. Very difficult to deal with it emotionally, psychologically. So I know specifically there are many people working in these hotels we're associated with that if they were in Ireland, they'd just be on the dole. So why can't we make that kind of change? I mean, we're all travelling, we know what's going on. Now, I was going to talk a lot about NAM and why the government did it, and I'm not going to do that today because it's been spoken about so much. But simply, I believe giving the guarantee on everything was simply stupid. It was done by people who aren't qualified to do what they're doing, and I'm certain of that. In the States, when you had got the Washington Mutual going broke, the only people that were guaranteed were the depositors. Everything else falls. But here, apparently, we have to guarantee everybody everything. And who ultimately is going to do it? When the politicians move on now, who's going to do it? Our kids and grandkids. That's the stark reality. Why did they do it? They were panicked into it, as far as I can see. Why did they do it? But somebody explain in simple language why it happened. Crazy. Now, with NAMA, I'm not certain that maybe it is a good idea to appoint the ex-head of the revenue in charge of it and send out all these messages that we're going to catch you and kill you and turn you out your house and all this type of stuff. I mean, you can't hold. I'm involved in that lovely golf course in Sawgrass. And if the golfers didn't turn up, they'd call the players, we couldn't hold the competition. And I believe developers are a necessary part of this to work our way through. We all hands on deck. We need everybody. And what I would do with NAMA, I would say, okay, we need to capitalise it. We were concerned that we were going to pay too much for the loans. And we knew that the banks were telling lies because I was going to meetings with AIB and saying, we've only one problem, it's you. I said, you must be joking. I didn't go down in the last shower. I know the property industry. And with the loans were being said, it was all lies, lies, lies. And to me, to see them being rescued and the treatment that doled out to us and people like me, I just say, come on, put up my hands. You can have the bloody thing. Throw them back the keys. So, to me, for those banks to be rescued by the Irish people and the treatment of dishing out, and to listen to that man the other day talking about the small businesses, it's just scandalous. I'd say if we had 50 billion of money for small business in this country, it would sort out the problem. It's not hundreds of billions. And any bank that has 12% Tier 1 is geared to deal with, problems. You don't have to have 30% reserves, but you need more than 5 or 7 or 9. You need a cushion. I was with the Bank of Montreal in Canada, and their reserves now are 12%. But I don't know if you're aware that in Canada, they only lend 85% of the deposit base. That would be the equivalent in Ireland of having, in the Irish banks now, a loan book of about 150 billion. Instead of that, we've almost 400. So where did that money come from? The interbank market, through our banks. So we became the main conduit. Everybody kind of knows that. So I want 100 million, a phone call. In fact, I didn't have to make it. An auction coming up. Paddy, can we take you out for lunch? Or by the way, we're going to Paris on Monday week. Will you join us? Champagne, everything. Fantastic. We had great fun. But we never had to make an application for money in the last 10 years. Never once. I remember Bank of Ireland saying to me, Paddy, will you put us on the list now, because I was very reluctant to do business, will you put us on the list for the Smurfit Group? And Jerry Burke said, we'll fly out and we meet John Flynn. I said, John Flynn doesn't want to do business with you. He doesn't trust you. It'll be okay. Fly out. Chris John didn't. But of course we could have had a non-recourse loan at a margin of 1%, and we were paying Anglo 2.5% with full recourse to us. So we were stupid. But I had a sense that things were going to go wrong. But How do you survive what has happened? I tell you, with great difficulty. Now, what would I like to see NAMA doing? I'd like to see it becoming a fully fledged property bank, properly capitalised. And I think all you need is about 5 billion. And take it off the national, get rid of it off the national, don't have it as a liability. Let the international community come in, fund it properly. And we had a situation now the other day with NAMA, and I haven't been in myself, but my son Christopher and Christopher and Simon were in, and they got, as far as they are concerned, a great reception. No, some of our partners said, no, it's just a trap. But we don't believe that ourselves. So anyway, I had this issue in Bray, and I touched on it earlier, and it was being held up by Anglo for about 9 months. Could we sign a lease with the tenant, which is the grocery people, the German people, went into NAMA in 4 hours to dealt with it. Just imagine if that became the new reality, that it became efficient. Of course, Anglo was always efficient up to, maybe too efficient, obviously. Now, so, maybe the wrong way. So, but just imagine if NAMA, we could get it out of our hair now. So I said, set it up as a proper investment bank. Take in all the loans. Do your joint deals with the developers, householder, everybody, and create a win-win situation. Get rid of all this fear business. Because in some way we're all responsible. I'm certainly very responsible. Now, when you think of these, I'll give you a story now. Our son John, who's now 24, getting married in 40th, 50th September, went off to the States, met an American girl in Temple Bar. Now, he bought a flat in Gallery Plea, the place that we built here. Now, he didn't even have to, again, ring up. The mortgage was there, $1 million. But if you could get into your heads that when he paid for that flat, at that point, he had paid, the Federation say, about 43, 44% of the cost in government taxes one way or another. So John has already paid, he's 24, 400,000. Now, at the moment the interest rates are low and he's rented out and is covering his face. Historically, all these things were paid off by inflation. Charlie here, when we met, I had phoned him up looking for, get a bit of mood into the apartment. Remember Frank, Charlie? Yeah, he'd stand up and confirm. But we go back to almost 40 years. And, but he came to set up the mood in the show house, but he ended up buying one of the houses. How much did you pay for it at the time? 12,500. Yeah, and you were in a little bit late. Maybe. Yeah, but you were slow getting to the races. So, but anyhow, apparently we never paid them for doing the sound because that was part of the deal or whatever. What did you sell it for?
30 grand.
How long did you have it for?
78, 5 years.
You see, we had, and some people gave out to me at the time, but we were always a kind of little bit into art, trying to learn. Don't know much about it. But having said that, Maury and myself went to London in the early 70s and bought a Rembrandt etching for 1,050. And we were down to our last 5,000, but we said we had, because we had worked through these problems that Michael Norris had helped us with. And I remember, we want to have something of real joy in the home. And it's hung there ever since. And we love his work. So I called some of the houses Rembrandts, Renoirs, El Grecos, all this kind of stuff. And so you're making little of those artists, but in a sense you are. But really, you're heightening awareness too. Now, I've read in the paper once or twice that I went broke. I've never gone broke. I've done deals with banks. Back in 73, I always remember going in and Maureen stayed outside and I took off my ring and my watch and I went into the creditors' meeting and I owed 145,000. And I apologised and I said, I never thought this could happen to me, but it did. But I'm going to deal with it, and there was a few laughs. Within 18 months, and Michael knows, everybody was paid in full. Not a penny more, not a penny less. But it happened. But it would have been so easy for me to give up. I remember clearly, and I was in a battle with a fellow called John Edmund Dial, and he was wiping me around the floor. Because he was a legal brain and a great talker. And somehow got Michael Norris into the situation. And he came in and put a flea in his ear, or maybe a bit more. But he frightened the man, and he never attacked me again. This fellow was a bully. Michael Norris, if you wouldn't mind, would you stand up and take a bow? You remember that time? No, where? Pardon? I know, but you gave me a right kick in the... So, I remember it's 18 months ago now, and we had finally borrowed from Bank of Ireland 3.2 million for the office, and I wasn't even, my son Simon had arranged it. But finally they were able to lend us some money. And so the dark clouds were coming. They wrote us a letter. We were a small little bit behind, but maybe 100,000. Agreed to pay it, conditionally on. I said, you'd pay it, but we want our money back. With Paddy. And I went to the meeting. It's not about you. We're going to force Anglo to pay your debt. I remember it so clear. I said, that's unprincipled. No, it's policy now. Of course, when February came and Anglo had fallen, Bank of Ireland were well under the way to trying to get their money. And I was incidental. The fact that I had business here, there and everywhere made no difference. No, these are the people. The same people are still running, the same directors. Who gave that instruction? I'd love to know. Apparently it's fair game. They've no concern for the destruction they create. And they don't speak honestly. I know it firsthand. I don't mind saying it publicly. So I don't know if anybody else had an experience that resembled that here. Am I going on a bit? Am I? Oh yeah, going on to the globe now. Oh, I had some ideas too of, we all know at this stage, Anglo should be closed. Anglo no longer exists. Close it and merge the business. Transfer the loan books. Same with Irish Nationwide. EBS merge it with Irish Parliament. Tidy up the game. No, these are small banks. Now, what would I like? Have any of you dealt here with ACC? You probably had a good experience. But anyhow, we had this great tenant from America. My son John had done all the leases. 10-year lease at 505,000 a year in Ballsbridge. And they got a valuer who had a conflict of interest, business, to say that the building would be worth more empty than full. And they wouldn't let the tenant in, having agreed to have them in. Now, 505,000 a year for 10 years would service at least 10 million, at 5.5%, forgetting about capital for a moment. So the building is now empty. They couldn't sell it for 5 million. And I went to see the top man who was over from Belgium. I said, why are you doing this? And he was kind of silent. I said, it's up to you. But you're creating your own problems. I can't solve it. So we found the tenant. So I believe they came in here and wanted to get out, and they tried to use the small loans to create leverage on the bigger banks. And they've done huge damage, I think, to the economy, personally. And will I do business with them again? Not if I live to be 100. Unprincipled. Now, I'm on to the... Sorry, am I holding you up there? Sorry. Here, I have to get myself... Yeah. Give me a second now. Doing business globally is the key for me. I remember so clearly Cement Roadstone heading off and about the first business from memory in Holland. And that was about 70, maybe 2 or 73, 71, 72. And today 5% of their business is in Ireland. And they're capitalised at something, in the downturn, of something like 11.5, 12 billion. I also remember John Flynn and myself, when Tullow Oil was launched, and they went out to raise 1,200,000, and John and I put 100 grand in each. And then it sank down a bit, so we got out and lost some money. But we were there at the beginning of that. Now that business today is worth about 10 billion, maybe 12 billion. So that's our two biggest companies in the stock market. You then look down the list and you say, well, what about the Kerry Group, Kingspan, Tullow Oil? All the value in the stock market within reason in Ireland at the moment is because of outside business, outside Ireland. Our banks never made it abroad. And that's very well, it's factual. And I don't know if any of you here ever heard of Whalen's Pony. Anybody here of Whalen's Pony? Well, when we were coming to Dublin, Daddy said, lads, I don't want you to be Whalen's Ponies now. Whalen's Pony was great in the local place and in the town next door, but when I went to the regional town, I came in last. So, are you okay? Do you understand that? Pádraig Harrington is not a Whalen's Pony. Rory McIlroy, I know him, played golf with him. He's not a Whalen's Pony. These fellas can do it internationally. And that's what we all have to do now. How are we doing? Now, do you think Bono could have been as big as he is if he just stayed in Ireland? Riverdance? So on we go. Now, I was down in Africa in January, and we went in with some American partners and chums lads over from Galway for 1,000 public-private sector homes for, not the diaspora, what do you call the expats. So we go down, we present. And we're coming to the line, who's against us? Now, you're competing internationally. The Chinese. Now, what do? They bring the money, they bring the materials, they bring the people. So we're down there. So we're naked. So we're saying to the government, surely you'd give us a chance and let there's room for both. But that's what you face. So I said, just imagine if you had a kind of, I talk about the Greater Ireland, and if you had an actual bank that people from Irish people all over the world would invest in, and say you had 5 or 10 billion equity in it. And what the number of us, said the 70 million, even if you said there was 20 million of us that would put in, what's 1,000 a head, Michael, with 20 million? Is that? But do you take my point that if, say, people could invest in Ireland, invest in the brand, people that love Ireland, people of Irish, I mean, I think we'd have something to carry with it, because our Irish banks don't do it. And you need a very specialised group of people who would go and support business abroad. And I think, when I see all these young lads, and we have to say John is gone now, our son John, but we're very concerned that he survives, you know, financially, emotionally, that he's in safe company. I did a lot of work in London now in the 80s, up around Camden Town. And these decent men from Donegal and Leaks or wherever, and they were beaten in London. They were living rough. You know, you just say, we need a support system for our young people in particular at the moment. The jobs aren't here, and when all the boys come back next year and are talking again, all of our friends, the politicians, they can't create jobs. There'll be certain jobs created, but you're not going to get massive creation of jobs. You don't put it like it. Those are real. And I know we can spin the wheels of our friend Ryan's, you know, the green, and it's fantastic, you know. But that's not going to create a lot of jobs. I know it's essential, but to exaggerate its potential, I think, is crazy. So young people have to get into the world. More in your family's father, their father's family, all went all over the world. You know, where am I in Israel? Well, yeah. I knew I'd get lost. Basically, when you want to, what are the examples? I read a book there, When China Rules the World. And China has 500,000 people now in Africa, and they're buying everything. But it was the expats, apparently, out of Hong Kong, that triggered this boom, were the early part of the boom in China, or of the buoyancy, or call it what you like. And so when you're in the States in particular, you notice the support there is for Israel among the Jewish community. And leaving aside politics, they are building one of the best infrastructures in the world now with technology and medical, all that. But it's fueled in no small part by the diaspora, by the Jewish diaspora. And my sense is that's the potential we have if we can ignite with our friends, with our families abroad. Now, Catherine, what have I left out? Oh, yeah. Well, I have to talk to you about this. It's running up here. Now, some people are very good in their own, but I'm hopeless. I work best in a team. And we write down, together each achieves more. That's how teams succeed. And, you know, we were talking, oh yes, one of the things I'd like to deal with, and it's not on the list. But all that money that has come in from the German and French and the European banks, we need somebody at the calibre that can go and park that for a couple of, maybe 20, 30 years, to give us ourselves a chance to grow here. And I'll make an example. Say we have 100,000, and I throw it into AIB or Bank of Ireland, and I leave more in short of food. Who does that benefit? And I was thinking as we drove up here of the famine period in Ireland, because the lads were in London and saying, you know, what's going on in Ireland, the absentee landlords. But sure, if they produced a crop of corn for us, and we have that, they can have the spuds. You know, and that was basically the mindset. Now, all this money that's come in from Europe, we can't pay it back at the moment. Maybe someday we can. So we need somebody like Peter Sutherland or Michael Summers that can go and do the right deal for us in Europe. And we don't need to send a whale and its pony now. We want to send someone that knows how to do it. Now, so, are you happy enough with that? Now, you all have heard of Mark Twain. And he said, I am an old man and have known many, many troubles. But most of them never happened. Do you get it? Now, I'm honoured to have been here today to be part of the debate. I'm sure I skipped over a lot of stuff. But I'm available for questions, and I'm available to try and drive the economy on again. I won't be spending more than 50% of my time in Ireland. I'm spending maybe, by desire, I want to spend 75%. In the 10 years I've coming up, because I'm in great old health, I reckon I've about another 33 years to go. That'll take me to 99. And in that time, I hope to have opened all these hubs all over the world. And did anybody know it takes less energy to smile than it does to frown? So thank you all very much.